Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. I made a video yesterday of Sal Grover, who made a speech at CPAC talking about the whole trans rights versus women's rights and how trans rights are taking away that of women's rights. This whole notion that transgender individuals, meaning biological men wanting to enter into female only spaces, why don't we see women that identify as being trans entering into male only spaces? Why don't we see that? Why don't we see the whole plight of, men's rights being stripped away from that of men because of transgender women identifying as being trans? You don't see it. But the only thing you actually do see are biological dudes that want to identify as being trans entering into female only spaces. You know why? Because it's a dark and really despicable fetish they've got. And they can't really hold on to that despicable fetish any longer because they are rather deviant, if you ask me. Trying to be in a female only space because you identify as being female is a rather deviant kind of thing. If you really think about it, it's also rather smart, but it's also at the same time rather despicable. I've said that quite a few times, but if you were to create a master plan of sorts to have this giant loophole, it would be this: men identifying as a woman, but they don't even know what a woman is because their definition of what a woman is someone who identifies as a woman. It's a circular definition. It doesn't work because they know the real definition, an adult human female, won't actually work with men. So Sal Grover is now under a great deal of scrutiny because of what she said. Because as we know, trans rights somehow top that of women's rights, which happen to be actually human rights. Trans rights are not human rights. This whole notion that transgender individuals have rights to begin with, that's a nonsense claim. Let's get into this article, shall we? Female only app creator says trans rights taking away human rights as she appeals gender identity case. Founder of a female only app, Giggle for Girls, who lost a landmark gender identity court case, has claimed trans rights are taking away our human rights. Founder of a female-only app who lost a landmark, I read that a moment ago, Sal Grover now says she is ready for round 2 after last week filing an appeal against August federal court judgment, a major gender identity ruling that declared that sex is changeable and not necessarily binary. The ruling is stupid. You ask me. You can't change your biological sex because your sex is binary. Get with it. Miss Grover was ordered to pay $10,000 in damages after she was found to have indirectly discriminated. Not directly, it's indirectly. Believe me, you can do that nowadays. Didn't know you could, but you can, according to a court of law, against Roxanne Tickle when Grover removed Roxanne from Grover's dating app Giggle for Girls in 2021. AI software designed to filter out men had cleared Tickle, but Miss Grover removed Tickle from the app herself after seeing Tickle's profile. Because Roxanne Tickle, is a biological dude. Justice Robert Bromwich came to the conclusion that Tickle was excluded from the app for not looking sufficiently female and therefore was indirectly discriminated against. Sufficiently female. That's interesting. So you're admitting that you must look female in order to be somewhat a female, right? Oh dear, oh dear. Some people, man, are just absolute, utter, dim-witted dingbats. Speaking at the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC, in Brisbane on Sunday, Ms. Grover insisted somebody's biological sex is immutable, meaning it can't change. And it was a natural human instinct for us to be able to tell this. And it's so simple too. Like, how dumb do you have to be to miss the fact that someone is a man or a woman and you can't change that fact? You'd have to be pretty stupid, if you ask me. And if you are then being told by law that you cannot acknowledge that really basic instinct, you have lost the ability to recognize one of our most basic skills, she said. If you just look to the person sitting next to you right now, you can tell if they are male or female. Now, imagine if you can't do that anymore because you've got to ask, do you have a gender identity? What is your gender identity? And if you don't acknowledge that and give meaning to that, then you're breaking the law. It simply doesn't work. In fact, it's rather dangerous. You can't live in a healthy, functioning society if that goes on, I'll have you know. Ms. Grover added, we are told constantly that trans rights are human rights, but human rights cannot be rights that take away other people's rights. That line itself is bloody brilliant. Well done, Sal Grover. Like, she just demolished the entire transgender trans rights arguments with that one sentence. We are constantly told that trans rights are human rights, but human rights cannot be rights that take away other people's rights. That should be simple. That's how society is supposed to function. You've got male rights and female rights, which make up, you guessed it, human rights. Not this other individualized gender identity rights, trans rights, non-binary rights. You're going to have this list going on and on and on if it doesn't stop. And it's not only that they're taking away our rights, we're actually being coerced into giving up our rights. You've got no choice. Now it's like, if you say anything against these individuals, you're the bad person. You're in trouble. That's wrong on so many levels. She recalled first receiving an Australian Human Rights Commission complaint in January 2022, citing gender identity discrimination. He had onboarded the app at some point. I don't remember, but I would have seen a picture of a man and gone, that's a man, and blocked him, she said. And I was right. In a normal world, we would have lived happily ever after. So the thing is, because a AI program accepted Roxanne Tickle and not actually Sal Grover, if it had been Sal Grover looking at this person before accepting Roxanne Tickle, it would have been a different story altogether. But because Roxanne Tickle was accepted by AI and not by an actual woman, now you've got a significant problem, which is why I think, because AI is rather biased, that's why I think humans need to still be around. Tickle has been living as a woman since 2017. When Tickle began taking testosterone blockers, estrogen and progesterone, with the effect, as this person added, described, of inducing a second puberty. You can't do a second puberty, mate. You only got one puberty, I'll have you know. And changing most of Tickle's body, the federal court ruling noted. Geez, the federal court, bunch of dim-witted dingbats. Like, you can't go through a second puberty. That's not even, what the hell? Huh. Tickle began to use female changing rooms and started playing in a local women's hockey team. Tickle began shopping from the women's side of the clothing stores and began a process of removing Tickle's facial hair, but the bone structure and everything else had already been done. Like, you can't change that, man. Just saying. Tickle underwent gender-affirming surgery, meaning Tickle chopped off Tickle's dick 2019 and changed the birth certificate. See it reissued by Queensland, good old Queensland, in 2020 to list Tickle as female. Oh, just because the birth certificate's been changed. Well, if you were actually really a female, why have you got to change it? That's interesting. Oh, it's a new development. But still, just because you change your birth certificate doesn't make you female. In court, Tickle sought more than $200,000 damages for direct discrimination. Tickle also wanted a published written apology and the same access to the app as other female users. Tickle said that persistent misgendering by by Miss Grover had prompted constant anxiety and occasional suicidal thoughts. Yeah, well, we know they use that quite often. Anyway, Miss Grover and the Giggle app argued there was no discrimination, with claims that Tickle was a man. In the end, the judge did not agree that Tickle had been directly discriminated against, but ruled that Tickle had been a victim of indirect discrimination through imposing a condition on the use of the app that users have the appearance of, I'm not going to use that word, women, which had the effect of disadvantaging women with a transgender gender identity relative to women gender identity. Geez, that's a mouthful. Far out. And cisgender. Screw you, whoever came up with that. Speaking outside the federal court after the decision, Tickle spoke to the fallout from the unlawful and discriminatory exclusion from the Giggle app, which was not unlawful or anything like that. But anyway, that's the story. We know we don't have to go back over what took place. I think the whole thing is just ridiculous. But Sal Grover is right. This whole issue of trans rights are human rights and trans rights somehow trump that of women's rights. If you have to give up your rights, your God-given immutable rights, for that of somebody else's delusion, that is absurd. That, to me, is dangerous and harmful. And you're not living in a proper, healthy, functioning society if you have to give up your God-given immutable rights for somebody else's delusion. No, thank you. And it's a good thing and the right thing to actually fight back and say, enough's enough. I'm done with this nonsensical shit. Anyhow, my friends, you guys take care, be blessed, and I'll see you all in the next video.